Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Stages Podcast. Talking about the 116th edition of Paris-Roubaix. My co-host, JB Hager, and a special guest, a man who knows a lot about Paris-Roubaix. You weren't there for the first one, right?
The first one, 116 years ago?
No,
yeah.
not.
Okay. No. Our guest, our special guest, my old buddy, teammate, good friend, George Hincapie, who, I'm just going to get it out of the way, is $100 richer.
We'll share with how he got that $100 more towards the end. I missed all that action.
It's you know what? Yeah, you people will have to wait. But George Hincapie, as wealthy as he is now a wealthy plus $100.
And we are kind of a special treat
right here.
Oh, there it is. He's paying up.
I have the 100.
What's the little note on the back written there?
I don't know.
Does that mean I get another 1,000?
I have no idea what that is. Just take it.
Well, I think it's only fair to mention our setting for this podcast.
That's right.
We are in Greenville, South Carolina at Hotel Domestique.
Yeah, I'm really excited you guys made all the trip down from Austin and check out the hotel and do the Stages podcast
This is
here.
Beautiful place.
A lot of cycling fans have come through here, either come to your Fondo or come here for training camps. But for those of you listening, you can't really see it. But for those of you watching, you can see the view and see the beautiful mountains out here. I got to tell you, George and I did a camp here with some folks a few weeks ago. And I mean, there's some legit climbs around here. If you think of, you're thinking of South Carolina or North Carolina, these are straight mountains. Like, these aren't hills anymore. This is a real thing.
You get a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So
This is really great. World-class cycling right behind us.
Great cycling destination and the perfect place to stay.
So the headline, I mean, for me, fellas, it was just a week ago where we covered the Tour of Flanders, and this thing was just completely flipped. Last week you had Peter Sagan, who was the heavy favorite and didn't have the team to overcome and overwhelm Quick-Step, and Quick-Step used the strength of their team to dominate the race. Today in Paris-Roubaix, I mean, honestly, I don't know what Quick-Step was thinking, but Peter Sagan rode like the beast that he is, went away with 50 kilometers to go, and that was kind of it.
I know at one point, George, you kind of looked over and like, Quick-Step needs to go on the attack here, or send off another attack and control the front. I guess they weren't. Maybe, are they just tired? I mean, do you start to get tired as you get several classics in as a team?
Well, there's no question this period of the cycling season is the most stressful period for these guys. I mean, the mental wherewithal that it takes to make all these selections and the position battles day in and day out is really, really stressful. It's all one day, all out racing. So towards the end, like, this is the end of the sort of goal for a lot of these guys. And some of them are tired. You can just tell today. Quick-Step was trying the same tactic. But Bora was much better than last weekend. Marcus Berghardt was really strong, and Daniel Loss. So they were kind of doing the same thing, and they were really covering the moves. And Sagan just kind of sneaked away. He's world champion. He should not be sneaking away. That should not have happened, but they weren't. They just didn't have the legs to go at that moment.
I just wonder how beat up teams get, as the season progresses. I mean, you're doing Flanders, you're doing Ghent-Wevelgem and all these races, and you see all the crashes, and the teams just can sort of get so beat up, and maybe they try to recover before the Grand Tours.
They've shortened those midweek semi-classics. They've shortened. Back in the day, things like Harelbeke, Ghent-Wevelgem, those were also 250 kilometers. Now they can't be longer than 200 kilometers. So imagine then how tired you would be. But for these guys, I guess they're kind of, I mean, George can speak to this, but they're probably done. I mean, the specialists that have done the cobbled classics, probably aren't going to do Liège unless they're working for somebody else. Amstel maybe, but that's a super tough hilly course as well. So this is probably it.
Yeah, there's quite a few guys that can cross over from Flanders and Roubaix to jump into Amstel and Liège. Even though they might have the capabilities, they're just the engine is working at a different rate at that point, and it's rare that they'll be successful in the next couple of weeks if they try to race it.
But I want to go back to Quick-Step because I didn't understand. And again, I'm just full disclaimer: never done Paris-Roubaix, so that's why it's so perfect to sit here with George and just say, "Okay, George, you answer all the questions." I have no idea what it's like to do that race, other than the few times where the tour has gone through there. But that's a completely different experience. But when you had Sagan up the road with these two guys, the Swiss kid and the kid from Lotto, and then you had the group with Quick Step's Nicky Terpstra and these 5 or 6 guys in total, and then you had a group behind with 3 or 4 quick steppers. It's like, to me, and Terpstra's group wasn't closing the gap to Sagan. I don't know why they didn't just come together and go, okay, now we'll bring him back.
Yeah,
that was a mistake.
I agree that we were talking about that, and that's a game time decision. I think whoever the director was for Quick Step, he needed to make that call and say, you need to wait. They're 7 seconds behind. We got 4 guys behind.
Yep.
You can do a lot more chasing with these guys than if you keep going on your own. But who knows what was going on in the radios? Who knows if Terpstra decided he didn't want to wait? But certainly he could have gotten a lot more help if he waited for that group.
Well, that is the knock on him. I mean, I loved his ride in Flanders, but the knock on him is that, sometimes his radio isn't working. I didn't hear that. And so that's, Christian Vande Velde was sitting there watching the race with us as well. And I asked him to get a confirmation of that. And that's kind of the knock.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's won Roubaix and Flanders, so he's doing something right. But he might not listen all the time to his directors.
Yeah, but today, I mean, I didn't understand that. Unless, and like you said, George, I mean, we're not listening to their race radio unless everybody in that third group, was essentially the third group, just gets on the radio and says, "I'm dead. Terrible day." Then you just let Terpstra, go for it.
But 60K to go. Not many people are feeling great, but you could still make a difference if you work together as a team. So I can't imagine them saying that. But certainly something that was definitely a mistake.
Yeah.
As we progress, I wanted to get both of your thoughts on some of the conversations between the two off the front as they get into that last 10K. I'm always curious what those little back and forths are like. But and this may be a bit gratuitous, but there was one American in the race. I mean, this is just, and we're sitting with the American that had the best results ever in that event in 2005. Is that correct? On the year, second place?
2005, yep. Second.
Yeah. And, so as a part of you, that's something that's very dear to you, I assume. What's going through your head, George, as you're sitting there watching Taylor Phinney try to duke it out?
Well, I got the pleasure to race at Paris-Roubaix with Taylor. And, he was, it was one of my last years, 2012, I believe. I had some bad luck, a lot of punctures, and he was actually working for me and Alessandro Ballan, but he was very impressive, very confident, always at the front, great at positioning. Ended up 15th, I believe, that year, but I said that he was going to probably beat my place in Paris-Roubaix just because of the type of rider he is. And I was glad to see him up there today. He did a great ride, and I'm actually made a little bit of money on it too.
Oh, now it comes out. We didn't have to wait till the end. So we were at the house. George and I got up early. I stayed at his place last night, and I don't know at what point it came up. George said that Taylor was going to finish in the top 10. I said, I'll bet you $100 he doesn't. And just backing up, I love Taylor. He's like a little brother to me, and I'm a big believer in him. I believe that races like Roubaix and Flanders, he was made to win those races. Like, he was put here to win those. He's had a lot of injuries, a lot of crashes that have maybe held him back, but those are in his DNA. And so, but I just said, no, I got 100. I got 100. Says there's no way. And then he was in that second group, and he was right there, and then he got dropped. And as soon as he got dropped from that second group, I said, oh, what can I buy with $100, JP?
Really rubbing it in.
And the bitch comes on the velodrome and gets 8th, and you should have heard the room. I mean, it was. And at one point, I said, you know what? Screw it. I'll take it to 10,000.
Yeah, he wanted to go to 10.
And then when he got dropped from that second group, I said, it's 100,000 now. Thank God George is a good guy.
I wimped out.
So there was a little back and forth with you guys over the wager, and there was also a lot of banter about George's television.
Which I know I might need to upgrade the TVs at some point.
These big screen TVs they make now are when they first came out, the really big ones, they were super expensive. They were just completely cost prohibitive. But just like a lot of technology, it's every year the price gets halved, and so now the big ones, George,
are we really going there right now?
They're only a few $100. And so I
got 100 now. I'm a tenth there.
And I'll get George's back on this. Like, if you're coming out here to these mountains to Hotel Domestique to watch television, you probably don't have your priorities straight.
Well, then I'll get my own back and say that if this is the cycling capital of this part of the country and people want to watch the Tour or the Classics, I mean, they need to make that part. We had 20 guys in that room. It was cool. It was like a big watching party.
Fun.
That
was a fun time.
It was fun. Break this down for me, because I didn't know there were. I think they referred to it as sector ratings. I heard you guys talking about it for each of the cobble sections, and I want you to talk about that in depth, George. And also, by just observing you as we were watching, like, you just know every one of those sections. You were describing what they're about to hit every time.
Yeah, Roubaix rarely changes. The route's been the same, basically the same for 100 years. So I've done it 17 times. I know where all the little landmarks are, and I know all the different things to look for when the sections are coming up. So I didn't even really have to look at my computer during Paris-Roubaix. I knew exactly what was coming, when it was coming, and what I need to look for.
So that probably plays to your favor if you're one gutsy enough to do these cobbled races. But over the years, like, how many years in did you start to find a groove of, like, oh, I know this course?
You never find a groove, because it's good. There's a high probability that you're going to crash, you're going to get hurt. So you're always really nervous and stressed out about it. But in terms of knowing the course, I mean, 7, 8 years in, I was comfortable with that. I knew what was coming.
7 or 8 years.
That's a lot of.
I know,
that's a lot of experience.
You pass that off as if it's not that big of a deal. Like 7 or 8 years. Okay, now I'm comfortable with a race.
And there are, keep in mind too that there's an amateur version of, or a U23 version of Paris-Roubaix. So a lot of these, maybe not the Americans, but a lot of the Europeans have done it for years as amateurs or as juniors, or so they know. A Belgian or a Dutchman, or somebody from that part of France can come in and do it and have success early because they know it. But if you're coming from Greenville, South Carolina, or Austin, Texas, it takes 7 or 8 years to figure out, oh, all right, that's how this works.
I also picked up that, the wind direction comes into play a lot. So a cobbled section one year, 2016, could feel completely different 2017 if you're going into a headwind or a tailwind or a crosswind.
Yeah, absolutely, and it really plays into the strategy. The directors are watching the map, they're watching the wind direction, and they're really, especially these days, informing you on which way the wind is coming and which way the sector is going to turn, to be aware of getting at a headwind, crosswind, or major tailwind, and then you know how much more emphasis you need to put on how far in front of the group you are, or ahead of, in the position.
Because, as a fan, you're watching for the flags. And so what is I'm assuming when they turn and it's cobbled and it's a headwind, that's going to kind of shut it down a little bit. If you have that tailwind, that's when you might be more inclined to go, or do I have that right?
Yeah, tailwind or crosswind, because crosswind it's hard to get a good draft, and you can really put people in a uncomfortable position easier.
It's just something to watch for as a fan.
Same on the climbs. I mean, the big climbs in the big Grand Tours, assuming it's exposed, if you have a headwind, it neutralizes the whole experience for everybody. So I mean, for the strong guys want a pure tailwind, because then that essentially means that the draft that you would be getting off the guy in front of you is just getting drastically diminished.
I just wanted to touch on that, because as people watch these races and in the future, if you're watching and you look at the flags and which way they're blowing, you might have a little more insight of someone going on the attack.
Yeah, definitely that. But something like Roubaix, where, for instance, today was supposed to be generally headwind, you still have so many turns throughout the course. You're generally going north into the headwind, but there's many times where you're turning, making U-turns on yourself, and we're taking a hard right, hard left, and the wind is changing throughout the whole day.
And one thing to note, there was 9 of these sections we talked about this, of course, in the Tour de France preview we did a few months ago. 9 of these sections are in this summer's tour. What's the total? 6K, you said, George?
12K.
12 kilometers of cobblestones. I mean, we talked about it
Give us a basis of comparison for that. I'm assuming that's a lot.
That's more than we ever did. And that's more than
I would say twice as much as usually any other.
And they've got some of the gnarlier sections in there. So I mean, we talked about it in October. These guys like Quintana and these pure climbers, Froome. I mean, it's going to be hard. Whereas a guy like Nibali, as we saw in the Tour of Flanders, he can ride these things and he can get position and he can handle his bike. And so
it'll be a big difference. I mean,
big difference.
Today is 50 kilometers of cobblestones. But these are all specialists for cobblestone. So imagine the Tour de France peloton at 12 kilometers, and you saw how many people arrived the size of the groups today. It was 2 guys, 1 guy, 3 guys, and these are all specialists. So
how many guys start a day like today knowing they're not even going to make it to the finish line?
I'd say about half.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, that's just remarkable. I don't know if the average person knows that. They're in there, they're doing their work, or they have accidents or a bad day or whatever.
Or they're called in last minute and say, we need a 7th guy, and you got to at least come to the feed zone.
You bring up a good point. This is the first time that in Paris-Roubaix they've ridden with 7 guys. So they've taken the team now. We talked about this a lot last summer, from 8 to 7. Boy, you look at the situation Quick Step was in, and you kind of wonder an 8th guy, does that change their race? I would argue that it does. And I'm not a fan of going from 8 to 7. Or from 7 to 6. I'm not a fan of having less guys. I think we should have, the traditional amount of 8 and then 9 in the Grand Tours. But it makes a race like this a hell of a lot harder with 1 less man.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like much, but you start the race, the first 100 kilometers of Roubaix, you have 50% of basically every team. Their task is to get in the breakaway. So right there, you take 1 guy less that's trying to make the breakaway, and there's usually 3 or 4 guys from one team trying to make it. It's a really tough task to make the breakaway. It may look easy on TV. When you turn on the TV, there's already a breakaway, 10 guys. But if there was a Quick Step guy in there, like Dillier was today, he gets a much easier ride. Quick Step is on a much less defensive position. It changes the whole dynamics of the race.
Yeah, I made a note of that, JB. First of all, that breakaway was away for 214 kilometers. Sylvain Dillier, who gets second, and by the way, not for nothing, he didn't get second by 100 meters. He was on Sagan's wheel. So he's in the break for 2:14, pulls with Sagan all the way to the finish line, and then loses by a bike length. That's sort of like man of the day. That's ride of the day.
Well, I'm guessing he had to make a decision. Do I work with Sagan? Because we kept seeing him pull through, and every time you guys were all like, whoa! He was doing a lot of work, but then he could risk not getting on the podium.
Yeah, we were having those discussions too, but you never know how he's feeling at that moment. We just assume, why is he working with Sagan? Sagan is going to beat him, but he probably was on an incredible day. It's a lot less stress being in the breakaway. Although you're doing more work, you're not dealing with the stress the peloton is. So, at the point that Sagan's catching Dillier, they were much more level playing field there. Obviously, because Dillier was pulling through and did an amazing ride at the end.
By the way, this kid was a U23 world champion. So this is not some bus boy that they rolled out for the Paris-Roubaix. This kid's, he's a good bike rider, and but yeah, that was. I can see what you're saying there, though, George, too, about being on that early break where you don't have to stress about position and fighting and the sprints just to make these sectors and not stress about being 100 deep and then crashes and mechanicals. And you're in that group. There were 6 guys. Okay, here comes a section. Let's all line up, guys.
They kind of communicate and get a rhythm.
There's no fighting.
You saw at the first section, 100 kilometers into the race, 180K to go. Greg and some of his BM, they lost Stephen Kung. I probably said that last name wrong, but early on they lost him. Greg got stuck behind a crash. He catches back up. He makes his way back to the front. That you're burning matches. Every little bit counts in Roubaix. Gets his way back to the front, gets stuck behind another crash. So just from that little bit being behind in the first sector, which really shouldn't matter, he burned some really important matches, and it might have affected his final result.
I got a question for George, because having never done it, when we did it in the Tour, we rode. I guess we might have put on some beefier tires, but our bikes were the same bikes, the wheels were the same wheels. But there must be, and I know over the years they've tried suspension, they've tried front and full suspension, they've tried all these different things. What changes now for these bikes? The frame, the wheel, the tire, and the handlebars.
So you remember our old mechanic Julian DeVries? He used to age our tires. He had a wine cave for tires. It would age them for years before we threw them on for Roubaix.
Thousands of people now wanting to go to Julian DeVries' tire cave.
But now, obviously, the tire technology has gotten a lot better. They're definitely using beefier, bigger tires. The carbon wheels are all now pretty much bomb-proof. So they're all got the carbon wheels. Some guys put a little extra handlebar tape on their bars. There was a couple of guys in the race today without gloves, which for me was there's no way I could have ever imagined doing that race without gloves. My hands would have been destroyed. So I found that interesting. In terms of other stuff, they might change their frame to a bit more compliant carbon, where they get a little bit less stiffer ride. But that's about it.
Is it still popular when you hit the cobbles just to yank the handlebars off, or was that just a George thing?
No, that was definitely
George didn't really think that was that popular either. He didn't like that. It was that did not trend well with George when the handlebars came off that
Every
bike.
now and then I'll pull up that clip as we were prepping for this. I was like, oh my gosh.
Every year during this time, I get people sending me videos. And I remember that? Yep.
You were steering, but it just wasn't.
Remember that.
Got a big bump right here that always reminds me.
You know, the one other thing I noticed, which I think is an awesome idea, is those remote brakes up on the top. So you had like a little hand gripper brake. Whereas, because a lot of times, I mean, the times that I've ridden the cobbles, you know, it is more comfortable to be up on the tops and just sort of try to get over them. But they had those brake levers up on top as well, which obviously, if you're up there and you're, you know, trying to slow down or brake or whatever, you got to reach back out to the brakes, which is a bit of a pain.
Then there's always the excitement of finishing on the velodrome, which proved to be exciting today.
Absolutely. I mean, we were wondering how Dillier was pulling through with Sagan, or why he was, and then he comes onto the velodrome in first, looking very confident. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen. Obviously, Sagan was the favorite, but he put on an amazing show.
And I guess we don't really know this kid that well, but he's done a bit of track racing in his day. So, I mean, and obviously Peter Sagan as well. He can handle just about any surface condition, environment, whatever. But if you just had a group of 5 guys coming in and one of them spent his younger years racing on the track, I mean, serious advantage of where to be positioned, how to slingshot off the top of the track and just get that run on guys. And
it's got to be harder than it looks.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys make it look very, very easy. It's just a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Well, especially after 6 hours on the bike, everything, all your reactions slowed down and just...
Yeah, you forget. They're cross-eyed.
Yeah,
I mean, they're completely heart going nuts and cross-eyed, and they make it look so easy. I mean, that's got to be difficult. I did overhear you saying today, it's like, yeah, a lot of these guys, and I may be quoting you wrong. You were like, a lot of these guys can race really good to 120 miles. Then it just extra bit, like that's when things really start to fall apart. Can you describe that?
Absolutely. I mean, everybody in there are some of the best cyclists in the world, but there's only a handful of guys that are the true classics guys that can do the 260 kilometer, 160 mile distance. From 120, they can all do it. Once you get past that 120 mark, then the true classic guys, the guys with the big endurance and the big experience come
And you
out.
need some years. Like you can, I mean, it's tough to do that as a 21-year-old, 20-year-old neo-pro to go bust out 260 kilometers. I mean, it's a lot easier when you're 30 years old.
Are some of these guys staying in their prime longer just with modern training, probably doing more, taking care of their bodies better? Are they racing longer age-wise, or is it still about when you guys were
That's a good question. I mean, but there's definitely much better ways to monitor your training, your recovery, your sleep patterns. So, I mean, that's definitely all plays into your longevity of your career.
And I guess there was, again, I missed it. You guys were talking about it afterward. There was some sort of a medical emergency.
Yeah, I have the article pulled up here. This kid, Michael, I mess up his name, Michael Goulertz, has a heart attack in the race. Either, and it's not there. There was no footage of it. Just sort of eyewitness testimony or accounts of it. But they were seen on the side of the road with the paramedics with the pads out, giving him a full, trying to bring him back. So I don't know if he had the heart attack, cardiac arrest, and then crashed, or had crashed and then had the heart attack. But when you have a 23-year-old kid from Belgium in the biggest one-day race of, by the way, he's trending on Twitter, number 3, and just falls over, which is just so, obviously we send out our best to him and his team and his family, and
scary stuff.
Yeah.
You were pretty excited before we started to see it trending on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, it's not like there's no other sporting events going on in the world. I mean, I'm like the biggest golf fan in the world, and I suggested to the room at 20, I was like, "You guys cool if we switch it over to the Masters for a second just to see what's going on?" That didn't go over too good, but I mean, it's trend. Yeah, I mean, you have all these major events going on, and it's awesome to see. Well, by the way, it's trending. It's number 3 in the United States, which to me is amazing when you only had one American in the race. Like if you had 20 and we won, okay, I get it. But no, I think it speaks volumes for the event and the sport that, is on people's radar, I guess.
It may have something to do with you guys getting out there and talking about it.
Let's hope.
You know, it might have something to do with it. George, out of curiosity, best and worst memory of Roubaix over the 17 years?
Ooh, worst. They actually pointed it out today was when I fell in that ditch, not even breaking my shoulder. It was, I think the year before that, or 2 years before, no, actually a while before that. I broke my shoulder in 2006. In 2001, I was with Tom Boonen. We're chasing Museu down. It was an incredible day. I felt amazing the whole day. And I didn't do the little things that you do in the 260-kilometer race, which is eat, stay warm. It was freezing cold and raining, but I was like, I feel so good that I'm not going to eat as much as I usually do. And all of a sudden, we're in a position where we're 10 seconds behind Museu, and it's Tom and I. Can't be in a better position than that. Two teammates chasing one guy alone. And I started getting that rubbery feeling in the legs, and I started asking Tom to slow down a bit, and that's 30K to go. Once you get to that point, in a 260K race, there's no coming back. And I just got worse and worse and worse. And like I was saying earlier, your reaction time slows down. I had one of those slips that I had 100 times throughout the day before that, during the day. And I just fell into a ditch. And here I was, third place, or second place in Paris-Roubaix, 10K to go. And no shit, I said, I'm not getting out of this fucking ditch. I was laying there.
Well, you're going to stay in the ditch?
I did not want to get up.
What was in the ditch? Was there
mud, and
like
I was just laying there.
Funk.
The only reason I got up was there was a helicopter hovering above me, and the camera's right on me. I go, shit, and I got to get up.
Because you're on television?
Yeah, I was on television. Got up, crawled to the finish line. That was probably the worst bonk of my entire career, and it was really disappointing too. I made a lot of stupid mistakes throughout the day, and it was a great opportunity for me to do an amazing Roubaix, but I just
lesson learned.
Lesson learned.
Best moment?
Sometimes on your best days, you have to take care of yourself the most because your engine's just really firing on all pistons.
Yeah.
All right, best memory?
Best memory, just probably finishing second in 2005. My daughter was there. I still have pictures of her with me on the podium, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, she's 13 years old now. She was 2 years old back then. And it's just it's amazing how time flies, and I'm glad I got to share that moment with her.
Who won that year?
Bonin.
So y'all weren't together?
Yeah, it was Bonin and I and Fletcher. Three of us together at the end.
Huh.
How would
I would always watch. This is a funny story. So I would of course never be there, but I would sit at my home either wherever I was living those years, either it was Spain or Nice, and I would watch the race, and I would always I just get I'm like, whoa, I'm trying to control shit from like 1,000 miles away. And so I'd call Johan and be like, hey, do this. And he's like, I can't believe he kept picking up the phone. But there was one year where they were coming into the Arenberg Forest. George, you take it from here because it's.
Yeah, so we're coming into the Arenberg Forest, which is probably one of the most stressful moments in cycling. This day in particular was freezing cold, muddy. And Johan's on the radio telling me what to do the whole time, and I hear phones ringing, and he's like, yeah, Lance, okay, I'll tell him. Johan gets ready. George, Lance says take your leg warmers off. I'm like, really? I got 3K to go to the fucking Arenberg Forest, and Lance is at home on his couch telling me to take my leg warmers off.
Probably, sipping having a cold beer, like, hey, well, you should probably take those leg warmers off. Now's a good time to do that. Me, of course, me not knowing anything, not knowing shit from Shinola, and I was like, God, it just would feel so much better, George, if you didn't have those leg warmers on.
So those leg warmers were on the side of the road about a K later.
Did you get them off?
I got them off.
See? Who's your daddy? Give me that $100 back.
Lance has made reference to the director being in your ear during a race, and you guys both worked with one of the best, and watching some old clips, you'd hear Johan going, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. It's like, how
I think that was the same year, actually, where I took the leg warmers off, but then I flatted in the Arenberg, 5K later. But it's really important. I mean, it just keeps you focused. It's so easy to make mistakes in that race or in any race for that matter. But you have a good director in the car who's stable-minded and is telling you what to do and just really focused on the end and not what's happening at the moment. It's really important to have somebody like that on the radio.
How does Sagan stack? This is not a fair question, but a fun one. How does Sagan stack up today, finishing Paris-Roubaix against Museu, Boonen, you? He's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
impressive.
That it's not like he won the way people would have thought he would have won. I mean, he just, like George said, I mean, when does the rainbow jersey ever sneak away? They don't sneak away, especially when it's Peter Sagan. You know, he goes away with 50K to go alone, bridges to that group, has 2 guys with him, you know, gets them to help him. But, I mean, he basically did a 50-kilometer time trial as the fastest guy in the race, right? So he can always has the option to say, you know what, I'm just going to sit here and follow the wheels and win the sprint. But no, he essentially pulled a move that a power guy like Terpstra pulled last week in Tour of Flanders, which is pretty iconic. The one thing before I forget, like I was watching or looking at Twitter this morning, somebody posted up a clip of him before the race, and the guy's like, you know, what's your dream scenario today? And he's like, his voice is like, for the biggest guy in the sport, one of the biggest athletes in the world, his voice is crazy. Like, it's be the first on the velodrome, but be first or something like that. I was like, it is just, and that was it. He was done. It was like Bill Belichick. Like, I don't have anything. First on the velodrome, and he did.
What might have Sagan and Dillier been saying to each other? Because they clearly worked together to secure first and second, but...
My guess would be Sagan would say, look, work with me and I'm not going to attack you to the finish. You know, they might have made an agreement where just give me what you got and I'm not going to attack you.
Was it in Swiss francs or was it in Slovakian rubles? No, but look, in all seriousness, for Dillier, that was... look, he stays there. He gets second, right? If Peter Sagan rides him off the wheel, then he would have been caught very quickly. So we were all surprised he worked as much as he did, especially after having been out there for 200 plus kilometers. But I mean, like I say, that's I mean, you can't, obviously Peter Sagan is the champ, but that kid's ride, you have to kind of say that was ride of the day.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely the star ride of the day.
All right. What's it feel like to be Peter Sagan today?
I mean, he's won basically everything you can win in cycling.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously
he hasn't won Roubaix. He never won this.
Yeah, so
this is his first Paris-Roubaix. So that's probably, I suspect it means something to him.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's probably, I think he's, you know, there was a little, I loved this. There was a little back and forth this past week between Tour of Flanders and Roubaix. He made some comments after Tour of Flanders about the Quick Step team and about how he's always. You know, obviously he's always the favorite, but he's always sort of quote unquote picked on, and they won't work with him, et cetera, et cetera. So Tom Boonen, you know, great classics rider, great champion of the classics, you know, really kind of went after him. He was like, look, he said some pretty critical things, like all you ever do is sit on the wheels, and you never do anything, and your team, blah blah blah. And so I think for him, you know, he said, look, I'll talk on Sunday, and I think that's a big vindication for him. And you know, I saw a bunch of comments on Twitter like, you know, checkmate. You know, Tomica, what do you got to say about that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think we should spend a little bit, 1 minute on the one American on the race. I mean, everything he's gone through.
I got to go to the bathroom. I'll be back in just a sec.
It's amazing.
My stomach's a little upset.
Come back.
Bear back.
My $100 that I won today. But really, Taylor did an incredible ride. He was in the final move with the best riders in the world. And the team made a decision at one point, said, Taylor, you need to work for Sepp. And you saw him go to the front at the Cap de l'Arabe and really put it out there for his guy. And he still finished 8th place. So for me, that was an incredible ride, an incredible comeback, and I'm excited for his future.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, well, to add to it, I mean, Taylor had some pretty serious injuries that might have taken him completely out of the sport that he's recovered from. He comes from parents that are very familiar names in the sport.
Yeah,
a lot of people are pulling for him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see him back at that level and racing with the best guys in the world.
But let's just get real here. I mean, because when he got dropped from that group, and I agree with everything that George just said. I mean, these races are in his DNA, and JB, we talked about this last summer when it was, you know, where we were trying to figure out if the daily video was, you know, how was that? Is that good? Is that what is that? And I love the kid, but I'm always like, look, this guy. Easily, when I first met him, first saw him ride and first saw how smooth he was on a bike, I was like, that kid has 2 Flanders in his legs and 2 Roubaix, easy, at a minimum. And then a world time trial championships and then a world individual, you name it. I mean, the dude has wicked talent. But when he got dropped, I expected him to be gone. And then when they came on the velodrome, and I was like, well, what's happening? And then he gets 8th, and I lose my 100. I was like, you know what? It's worth it. It's worth it because I'm happy for Taylor. And, George needs some money.
Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No. Well,
next on the agenda, and you're not going to see it on television, the Texas 100.
That's right. Next Saturday.
I tell you, my
George,
flight got canceled.
No, George, you can upgrade yourself now.
I got an upgrade too.
You got an upgrade
to go to the first class.
We have but then the day after the Texas 100, which is next Saturday, the day after is Amstel Gold Race. So
right.
we can all sit down and do this again.
That will be.
You ever do Amstel?
Yeah, I did it with you a couple times.
You did?
Yeah.
Must have made a heck of an impression.
I love. No. I loved that race. For the fan at home, that's it's not a quote unquote monument, but it's a big spring classic, and it's in Holland. It's the only one they have. It's awesome. It's Flanders-esque, short, punchy, steep climbs, no cobbles,
1,000 roundabouts.
Yeah, lots of traffic furniture. But I loved that race back in the day. Also long, just like all these. So we'll be back on the air next week talking. And by the way, the title sponsor is beer. Fucking A. That's our kind of race.
We'll end on that note.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for tuning in.